Oh. Welcome, everyone. This is a lot of people.
Oh, people are piling in. Woo.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here.
Morning.
We've got folks on from DC and Georgia. Okay.
We did the best we could to try to use security measures, but if anyone pulls any nonsense with Zoom bombing, just everyone take a deep breath and we'll remove them quickly, you know. But we've looked and it appears as if we've got allies here. So
Yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us for this press conference about the BIPOC Land Access and Opportunity Act. I'm Kenya Lazuli, and I've been working on this project for a while with Brian and Steffen, who we'll introduce next. Brian, Steffen?
Yeah. So hello, everybody. My name is Steffen Gillom. I'm also really glad to be here, and just want to say this is, I think, a huge moment just to talk about this in a real way. And so anyway, my name is Steffen, and I am affiliated with the NAACP as far as a lot of other entities, and just glad to be here. I'm going to pass it on to Brian. Brian, go on ahead and take us out.
yeah, so I'm Brian Cina. I'm a state representative in Burlington, Vermont. I represent part of the Old North End in the East District. I live in the Old North End part, and I'm happy to be here today with Steffen and Kenya. We've been working for at least 6 months on this project, and it's nice to get to a point where it's becoming more public facing. And we're meeting here with you all to share sort of the initial outline of our idea. And the bill is being drafted. We saw the first draft, but it's not ready for public viewing because it's a draft. That should be done hopefully by the beginning of January. Are we going to just move on into the presentation now? Are we ready for that?
Yes, but I would also ask everyone to please mute. We're hearing a lot of feedback, so if you could all please mute if you can hear me and as you come in. Thank you so much. Go on ahead, Brian.
All right. So I'll just kick us off and talk about the legislative intent of this project. So we're calling it the BIPOC, the Vermont BIPOC Land Access and Opportunity Act, and really what we're starting off this bill by saying that it's the intent of the Vermont General Assembly to acknowledge and address systemic racism by creating new opportunities for individual and collective land access and ownership for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color in every town across the state of Vermont. When we look at the foundation of our current economic system, we can't deny that it was built on land that was taken from the Abenaki people and other Indigenous people on these continents. And the structures of our current economic system were built with the labor of enslaved people from Africa. This legacy of settler colonialism and chattel slavery has been the systemic racism and discrimination that exists today, and that's embedded into many aspects of our modern way of life on this land. In order to offer repair for this systemic discrimination faced by many people across our state and nation over the past 4 centuries, the state of Vermont must engage in a just transition to an economic system that undoes systemic racism instead of reinforcing it. The relationship between all people and the land on which we stand, that relationship has been abused by the system that we live in. And that relationship has been twisted and used to oppress people over the past several centuries. The laws and policies of our state and nation severed Indigenous people from land and denied Black people and other people of color from having the opportunity to access land and to own land. So in order to rectify this history, we have to create new systems and new opportunities for permanent Black, Indigenous, and people of color land access in every town in Vermont through collective and individual land ownership options. We need both. And we need to use new systems that empower and center BIPOC. The BIPOC Land Access and Opportunity Act seeks to fulfill this intent through several proposed mechanisms. And I'm going to hand it over to Steffen to begin explaining some of those mechanisms. Thank you.
Brian, thanks. So in an attempt to build capacity, the capacity of BIPOC folks who want to become land and homeowners in Vermont, we're proposing the creation of a BIPOC Land Access Opportunity Fund that is managed by a BIPOC-led board who has the power to budget the money as needed to applicants for down payments and on a sliding scale grants for homes, land, and farms. This money is intended to help BIPOC Vermonters better afford down payments for homes and farmland with the overall goal of creating housing ecosystems that incentivize our BIPOC in Vermont and to continue to enrich our state. Also, in the spirit of proactivity, it's important to note that we are proposing that some of these monies in the fund be set aside for BIPOC folks who do not yet live in Vermont and are looking for a pathway to residency in the state. Furthermore, we believe that it is important to offer additional resources to BIPOC home and land owners to help them better acclimate to the realities that come with being a home and land owner. So our bill also calls on the legislature to expand financial education and resource management programs. This will mean moving away from the use of harmful and insulting language, such as financial literacy programs, and instead shifting focus towards more innovative ways of engagement, such as the creation of partnerships between racial justice organizations and home ownership centers. We also propose that the state fund innovative financial education programs be developed by and for BIPOC. Brian?
Thank you. So I just want to take a housekeeping moment that people are messaging me to stop the ringtone, and I can't figure out how to do it, and so stop messaging me, because it's also, then that becomes an additional distraction. So, but I hear you, and I'll keep working on it. So back to the presentation. I want to talk just for a minute about mortgage assistance and tax benefits for BIPOC. When buying real estate, one of the greatest challenges for first-time buyers can be getting a mortgage. In writing this bill, we're considering some of the financial barriers, and we're exploring ways to make the acquisition of an affordable mortgage a reality for BIPOC. There's some questions that remain to be answered, and we're looking at how to do this through the bill, whether it be by specific solutions or a task force that or somebody who looks at these questions. And these questions are, do we need to change any rules to reduce barriers to getting a mortgage? How do we navigate the debt to income ratio issue? Can we provide mortgage assistance for part or all of the length of a mortgage? Once people have property, how do we make sure that people will be able to afford to keep that property and will not lose it due to other economic issues with our economic system? And are there ways to provide tax breaks for properties acquired through these programs? So we look forward to doing some more work on this piece as we move through this bill and the work that follows. So next, I'd like to hand it over to Kenya.
Thanks, Brian. So one of the answers to one of those questions is the question was programs. And every town is a BIPOC-led program working in collaboration with the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust to ensure that at least one quality parcel of land in every town in Vermont will be held in trust permanently for BIPOC stewardship and access. Land trusts in general can play a pivotal role in significantly increasing BIPOC land access and stewardship by utilizing mechanisms that will ensure that the land stays in BIPOC hands permanently. Another aspect of all of this is safety, and we definitely thought about that. And so one idea was to create anti-racist mutual aid organizations, and the creation of these anti-racist mutual aid organizations is a grassroots approach to building a culture of safety into BIPOC land access initiatives. by increasing the capacity of these networks' ability to address community needs, share resources, and adopt crisis management strategies. This bill aims to create safe space for BIPOC throughout the state of Vermont. And now I think Stefan maybe
sorry,
invited a friend.
You're right. I was queuing it up as we went there, trying to troubleshoot our little dingy issues. So anyway, with that being said, I think there's a couple folks who also wanted to add on and have a little bit of commentary. And so the first thing I'm going to do is call Mia Schultz. If you're in the audience and you would like to say a couple words, please do so. And then I don't know if there's anyone else that I spoke to yesterday, but if you are in the audience after Mia, just kind of pop yourselves in and I will look for you. And if I see you, I will call out your name. And if I don't see you, I will not put you on blast. Mia,
Thank you, Stefan. My name is Mia Schultz, and I am the newly elected president of the Rutland Area NAACP. And as a leader who comes from a place of advocacy and direct support of BIPOC community members, I know the immediate needs of our community. Some would argue that it really begins with land and access to opportunities that are not supported by the current system. And as Brian so eloquently said, we know that America was built on stolen land and stolen labor. And this act will be a model for communities and states across the nation to reconcile some of the damage and harm of the past. Our ancestor, the late Malcolm X, once said that revolution is based on land. Land is the basis of all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality. Vermont, it's time to start a revolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, my sister president. I'm glad to have you. I think at this time we can start to fill a little bit of questions. Would you all agree? Or is there any little housekeeping things that we need to say first?
I'd like to just take a moment to celebrate the silence. Let's just take a deep breath and notice that that chime has stopped. It's like, it's symbolic of something, right? So that being said, you know, the symbolism I see is that sometimes it takes a lot of people shouting about something for people to finally change it. And also sometimes it takes a lot of people working on a problem to solve it. So maybe that's maybe that symbolism is relevant considering this grand issue we're talking about. So yeah, it is time for questions. And I think what we're gonna try to do is have a system where if it's manageable, you can put your question in the chat and we'll call on you to read it yourself. And if you're uncomfortable doing that, we'll just answer it. But we wanna invite some interaction. And so that being said, I'm looking. Okay, so there is one question that has popped up. And if you put a question in already, you might wanna re-enter it just for organization purposes. So, and maybe Kenya and Stefan and I will all take turns calling on people. So since I'm talking, I'm just gonna call on the first person who would, and if we mispronounce your name, sorry. So I think it's Althea Sully Cole. Do you wanna ask your question?
Yeah, that was perfect pronunciation. Thank you very much for holding this session. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this and the initiative. My question is about how you're defining BIPOC, and you've identified Indigenous folks and Black folks as part of kind of the motivation to do this, just recognizing their roles on this land and in this country. But BIPOC is quite a broad term, and I was wondering, you know, what is that meant to mean or identify in this bill, and how it will be used to kind of organize access to resources.
Well, I'll start, and then if others want to jump in and add, that the definition we're using in the bill right now is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. When we say Black in this context, I think our main focus would be people who have descended from enslaved people, who came from Africa. I think that's what we mean by Black first and foremost, especially when we talk about the history of the country and who has bore the brunt of the oppression for 400 years. And when we say indigenous people, we're talking about the Abenaki people and all other people indigenous to this continent. And when we say people of color, we're talking about all other people who are not white, who also have suffered from systemic racism. And that, I think, includes people from African descent who are new Americans, for example, although they may also identify as Black. And that includes migrant workers, Latinos, Middle Eastern people, et cetera. We understand that this term doesn't sit well with everyone. And we actually, our legislative lawyers gave us some feedback. Like when we're looking at the language of the bill, we're gonna have to look at this piece more, figure it out. But I think for our public-facing communication right now, we're using BIPOC because that's an emerging term that's being used widely to express solidarity for people who are not white. I think just from my perspective as a legislator, that our priority needs to be indigenous people, and it needs to be people who have directly descended from enslaved people. That needs to be the priority. Although there's some others of us who are immigrants who experience, is that what we're saying, American descendants of slavery? Is that the terms we use change so much that, like, you know, like I'm constantly learning. So ADOS, okay, so American descendants of slavery. So that's actually easier to say than people who have descended from enslaved people. So thank you, Mia. So I guess what I want to end with is that I think we need to prioritize American descendants of slavery and indigenous people, because those groups of people have bore the brunt of the discrimination when it comes to land access. But we also are keeping in mind that other people have been affected if we dig into the history of the country. So I see Steffan's off mute. Do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I would just quickly add that I think it's not lost on us that BIPOC individuals make up a very insignificant when it comes to numbers wise. I think 7% or something like that. The number seems to change by everything I look at, but under 10% of the population here is BIPOC, and a lot of times that makes it easy. Oh, I see Mark Hughes said 4.5%. So I see that the reason I mention that is because it's easy to write off that percentage sometimes, and it happens in other places. And so when we say BIPOC, we did have all folks of color in mind, even though we do believe it's important to prioritize, as Brian said, indigenous folks and folks who are descendants of slavery. The reason why I mention this is because if we look at who owns land in Vermont, it doesn't matter what your racial background is. If you're a minority, you're not owning a lot. And if we look at the numbers, I think that a friend of mine was trying to send me the relevant numbers yesterday, the most up-to-date numbers, and I think it was under 500 pieces of land were owned and stewarded by folks of color. And there was something like over 20,000 pieces of land that were owned and stewarded by people who were considered themselves white. So if we think about that sort of disparity, and don't hold me together on the numbers there, I know that they're changing depending on what statistics and censuses you look at, but it doesn't really matter, because when you have such a gap, then we understand why the need is so important for folks of color, especially those two populations that Brian eloquently mentioned, to be prioritized somehow by our state. And so over 20,000, and folks of color, especially Blacks and Indigenous, less than 500, less than 1,000. That is a very striking statistic.
Should we take another question? I just got a message from Mindy saying Henry Harris has a question. You want to ask your question, Henry?
Hi, thanks. We're at the Grassroots Center, and we want to give up a few acres that has a cabin on it, and I'm wondering how all of us can get involved in donating land, or how we can help our neighbors donate land to a project. Thank you.
I'll answer this one if that's okay with everyone. There are several ways you can obviously donate land directly to a person you know, or a person you know knows. If you are more interested in like helping with the Everytown project, that's a specific program that we're doing, you would donate the land directly to the Northeast Farmers of Color Land Trust under the name of Everytown. We're partnering with them, and they are able to accept land donations and money donations, financial donations directly in order to sort of like further this program and this project of creating safe space in every town and land access in every town. I saw that someone else asked a question that sort of like piggybacks onto this one about safety. And part of our focus is on like the mutual aid networks that support the communities where these properties are. And there are a handful of white allies who reach out consistently, trying to find out ways they can help and support the project. So not just if you don't have land or cash to donate, that's okay. Like you can create a mutual aid network that supports people of color and be the interface between these people who are accessing land and the communities they're accessing the land in. They may not always be friendly. A lot of times they're not friendly interactions. And so if there's white allies to stand in between and help with the communication, help with the support, help set up safe space and anti-racist training and any other supportive actions they have at their disposal, that's super helpful. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. We're so excited.
Thank you. There was another question from Grace Gershony. Did I say that right? Grace?
It's Gershuni, rhymes with loony.
Do you want to ask your question?
Well, yeah, I have been so interested in this possibility for so long, and I'm very excited. So thank you very much. And I generally want to know how people like me can help in terms of organizing and spreading the word, getting people on board. But I also have a very strong interest in being able to share land, not necessarily donate, but to, set up mechanisms so that folks like me who have small acreages, homestead property available, but nobody who in my family who wants to inherit it particularly, or want to have, my own homestead secured for the rest of my life. So I've been thinking about ways to do that for a long time, and particularly to be able to welcome BIPOC folks into the community and encourage more migration of people who are interested in living on the land, etc. So that's my question.
I think I'll take part of it maybe. I think this question comes up a lot for people who want to share land and not donate land, and that is great. Like we love hearing that also. I'll just give you a little background on why that's not our first go-to. So historically, land is owned by white people, and Black and Indigenous people specifically have not been allowed to own land in this country. And so taking the ownership and the power out of the relationship with the land, and just like creating access for people to like be on the land and not be concerned about being removed from the land is a major part of this. I think that there's still like lots of magic that can happen between landowners who want to share their space. But I would say that these projects that we're discussing right now are maybe sort of separate from that, and that there would be other ways to go about reaching out to the community to say, hey, I have some land if someone wants to use it, and then creating a specific arrangement with specific people. I don't know if anybody wants to add more to that.
I think that was beautifully said and sums up all of our, and I think you said it. I think there's nothing more to add.
I agree. And I think maybe then we can move on to the next question. I see it looks like Jamie Contoy.
And I also see that Zamoria has a question too. I do want to give some time for BIPOC folks as well.
Okay. So I was just looking back at the queue, but if someone wants to keep a progressive stack where we prioritize women, LGBTQ, and people of color, et cetera, I'm down with that. If our helpers want to help with that. But I am going to answer. I'll just answer the next question while that work is done. So Jamie Contoy, because I can't tell who people are by looking at their name in a list. So I can't tell what your race is or I might be assuming your gender. But
I'm a white queer cis woman, and it's Jamie Contois.
Okay, can you ask your question, please?
I was just curious. It's first of all, thank you for this space today. It's so sacred, and I honor the work that you're all doing. And second, I wanted to just ask how Indigenous people are organized in Vermont. I haven't educated myself about that, and this bill really lends itself to that question for me. So I'm excited to hear how that's working.
So is it okay if I answer this one? Yeah, so so I suppose it depends what one means by organized. So I'll just share what I know, and I can't speak for all Indigenous people. So in Vermont, we have 4 state recognized tribes. So that's one way of organization, one way that communities are organized, but there's many Indigenous people in Vermont who are not affiliated with a tribe. There's the Vermont Commission on Native American Affairs, which is a piece of the government that is created to be sort of an interface between the state government and Indigenous people. And so that's another way people can organize, because through the commission, it doesn't just have members of the recognized tribes, it has unaffiliated Indigenous people on it. And I share those groups because those are groups I work with regularly, and that we do have an agenda that's coming out from the 4 state recognized tribes. This is separate from this group, but I'm happy to take just 30 seconds to share some of this with you all, since we do have 138 people here, so this is a good audience to share it with. The first thing the commission is asking for in this, I was wondering what was on your head. Now I can see it's reindeer ears. Sorry, I get very distracted by things, so I'll just focus. So speaking of reindeer ears, the first thing on our agenda is a bill to protect religious freedom and spiritual practices. So the idea is that what came out in the last few years in the legislature is that there was policy being made. One example would be Tobacco 21, where when I said, we're further criminalizing a sacred plant, and we're basically telling people who were 18 who used to be able to handle tobacco and smoke it for sacred purposes that now they have to wait till they're 21. And members of the Abenaki community came forward and said, we're breaking the law by giving our kids tobacco to put down and carry under the existing law. Like there should be an exemption for tobacco. And the pushback that we got from the American Cancer Society and from the state was ridiculous around how, it's this harmful thing we need to protect people from regardless of spiritual practices. That's just one example of some of the things that have come up that showed us that maybe we need to be more explicit in the law to protect that. And a big piece of that is actually land access. And a big piece of it is access to sacred sites and taxation of land. So there is an intersection with the work we're doing here. And then another priority of the commission in this upcoming session is going to be to ask the state to fund the commission working with the Indigenous community, specifically the Abenaki community, to come up with a proposed process for truth and reconciliation for colonization, which is a huge, huge project. And so the first ask is make the funds available and and empower the commission to go out and build a process with the community. So that's just some examples. I don't want to take too much time in the press conference to get deeper into that, but if anyone's interested in supporting some of the work that the indigenous community is doing in Vermont, you can reach out to me and we can talk more. And there's plenty of other cultural groups out there where people are organizing themselves that are grassroots groups. I just don't want to get into it in too much detail now because I just realized I just said a lot, but so on this topic. But there is an intersection between the agendas because there's a different conception, and this is why we're calling the bill Land Access and Opportunity. We took ownership out because this conception that you own the land is problematic, actually, and it's at the root of how the relationship with our land has been contaminated and soiled, no pun intended. So, oops, I went to mute someone and almost reported them. So anyway, so the next question, has anyone been paying attention out of our other co-facilitators to who's in the line?
Mindy gave me a list.
Okay, so
Megan,
take it away.
Megan Henry is next. Megan, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good, okay. I had a question. Are there going to be, or is there already set up loan programs for those who actually want to set up, let's say, a farming community, which is what I'm most interested in? I don't find the current system of land ownership or housing, owning a home as something that is sustainable. And so I've been, I guess for the past 3 years, I've been looking into intentional communities. And so in particular, BIPOC intentional communities. And I'm actually trying to start one ourselves with a focus on farming. I run a food pantry, so I want to grow food for that pantry. And so I'm just wondering, has there been any thought or any consideration given to people who want to go that route? As far as land ownership and, and having it be sustainable and having it stay a BIPOC intentional community. My goal is when I die, if I have this community, it would go back to the community and there will be people vetted out to, purchase or whatever, however that can possibly be set up. So, we can never make up hundreds of years of racism and systemic racism. However, we could set things up that we can take care of ourselves and others. I feed everybody, but I have experienced racism because I am so far the only Black person running a food pantry in my county, and I tell you, the backlash has been quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure. Thank you for that question. If it's okay with you, Stefan and Brian, I'll answer part. So first of all, I don't believe there are existing loans or grants for projects like the one you're describing. However, within this bill that we are drafting, that language is there for groups of BIPOC to purchase land together or to put in trust together or to hold, steward together. One project that I personally, with the Everytown project, has been working on with NOFA, Vital Communities, and the Vermont Land Trust is trying to figure out a space in the Upper Valley similar to what you described, but also sort of like training and learning farm.
Yes.
So young BIPOC who want these skills and don't have them could come there and live communally sort of with these other people and have a support network on site. And then, learn the skills they want to learn. And ideally this location, this, magical location in the sky would have enough land for grazing, enough land for vegetable crops, enough land for agroforestry, or anything else people wanted to do so that there would be overlap and there wouldn't be competition and there'd be support happening within that one site. So that is on our minds, absolutely. And what you're describing is amazing, and we hope to see it grow and happen. And maybe we can help support that if we can get this bill passed. So thank you for that.
I would also just add just quickly onto your point, Kenya, that I think that exciting thing about this is that there is so much opportunity for the Black and Brown creative mind to intersect this legislation at some point in time. And I'm so excited to see the beautiful things that could come out of it.
Thanks. So it looks like we have time for about one more question. Some of us have to go to our other jobs and things at 10. I'm projecting I have to go to work at 10. I know others do too. But Kenya or Stefan, do you see in the list, I think Mindy was trying to sort through, we're not going to get to everyone's questions.
Our next person was Zamoria, Brian.
Okay, and what I just want to say before we hear that last question is any other unanswered questions, we would like to be able to respond to you. And so Shane just plugged into the chat. It's quickly disappearing, but he plugged into a form you can fill out to get on our mailing list. And what we'll try to do is we'll try to see what questions we didn't answer and take them into account moving forward. Like I saw someone mention a fact sheet. That's a great idea. So there might be some, we'll look through. We'll try to look through and answer people. So it was Zymora, is that correct? I'm looking for the name in the list.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, no, it's Zamora.
Zamora, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Zamora Da Vinci. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited about this piece of legislation and to be here with some of my Shift Meals team. Hi, Brittany. Hi, Jean. Hi, Sammy. And everybody else that I'm already in community with or have not yet met. I'm excited to be like working on this with all of you and just like adding our input. I guess I had two questions that kind of came up for me as I was reviewing this bill and just like listening to everyone speak. Is for starters, I think that it's a pretty big misconception that the BIPOC community that exists internationally, nationally, and just here in Vermont doesn't necessarily always act as a community or with everybody's best interest in mind. And what I mean by that is I would like to speak to anti-Blackness that exists within the BIPOC community. And so I guess as somebody who is a Black Vermonter and is a descendant of chattel slavery in the United States, I guess I'm curious as to how you will be actively working to combat anti-Blackness that exists within this bill and within our communities, especially in terms of like who's going to be on the BIPOC-led board that's going to be responsible for budgeting money, who is going to be receiving these grants, and really just like every turn of this bill that is about allocating or redistributing resources to BIPOC folks. I just am curious and a little nervous about how anti-Blackness will or will not prevail, and if there's any concrete way that we can address that or speak to that in this bill and remember that as we are conducting this legislation. And then another thing that came up for me was how are we planning to navigate this idea of white BIPOC? There are many folks who may be ethnically of color, but racially white. And so again, I think I'm just a little concerned as to what that will look like in terms of like the BIPOC-led board and who's making decisions and who will be receiving grants or not receiving grants, because I think that it would be, it wouldn't be helpful if the majority of the folks that were benefiting from this program were white BIPOC or not folks that I guess experience the brunt of racism and anti-Blackness and just the powers that be, especially in the state of Vermont. So yeah, I guess if someone could just speak to if this is something that has been thought about or what is being done to just keep this in mind or to combat this.
I would like to invite you to be on the committee after that statement.
Exactly. So Kenya, I don't know if you have anything to say, but I really think that we should say something, you know, just off of our hearts. If not, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would say that for me, and the reason why I mentioned Kenya is because both of us are descendants of enslaved Africans. And I think that means something. I think that really means something. So I would say that first and foremost, all of us, but especially Kenya and I, have a really astute understanding about what anti-Blackness is and how that's different from the other oppressions that happen, how that is different from other stigmas that come down and impact the lives of other folks of color. And that conceptualization difference, I think, is going to be something that is inherently infused into anything that we advocate for within this legislation, right? So I think that the first thing is that people say for us, by us. Exactly, you know, so that's number one. Number two is when I saw your name down there, I wanted to pull you into the conversation so that questions like this could be posed. I think that if we would have been in a different time, right, or if this would have been a different set of folks that were not descended from slavery, people might not have pulled you into the conversation and heard any of those questions. And so just the fact of us being here, I think, is a start. It's not a perfect answer because anti-Blackness is so pervasive that it is not unlike folks who are Black to also perpetuate it. But I think that the multicultural competency piece that we bring to the table will help us to catch it and sift it as best we can. And I can say that I don't necessarily have all of the answers yet, but that is something that is a critical lens that we are using and that we have had lots of conversation about. And I would also say that we also understand that anti-Blackness is the root of all of this. And so when we look at anti-everything else, we understand that it started in and was perpetuated by a extremely violent history of anti-Blackness. And so I know that's not a specific answer because we're still working out things, but I would hope that just by me saying that, it would be a recognition that of where we're at.
Yeah, I would like to just support that, say that earlier I think I did say that we need to prioritize American descendants of slavery and indigenous people in this particular work, because those two groups are the groups who have been hit the hardest by the systemic racism. And it's important, and I think in that work that we need to be engaging communities with respect to. I'm specifically thinking with indigenous communities with respect to how our whole conception of land ownership is problematic at the start. You know, that this idea that we own land or that people could own people. You know, that's how this country started. You know, that's a small group of people decided they could seize and own land and own people, you know, and that we need to make up for that. You know, that this is in a way a form of reparations for the harm that has happened on this land. So in that work, we need to prioritize American descendants of slavery, and we need to prioritize indigenous people. And then and I see the role of other people of color as supporting that. And that through that work, it will benefit other people of color, you know, because it will begin to dismantle systems of racism. So I appreciate, Zamora, I appreciate your question. And, you know, moving forward in this work, because we're going to wrap it up in a minute, moving forward in this work, we are going to need help. And so it's great to see so many people interested. And there's many ways people can help. We're going to need people to help us do some of the work behind the scenes. Like, I just want to take a moment to thank you. Now you got to meet me and Kenya Lazuli and Steffen Gillom, but you haven't met Mindy Blank and Shane Rogers, who are allies helping us behind the scenes run this event today and helping us with publicity and helping us with a lot of the administrative work. And we're going to need more people doing both of those things. We're going to need more BIPOC helping us get out and get the message out there. We're going to need more white allies helping with the work. So please fill out the Google form. We're going to put out a press statement later that'll have some emails in it. Some people have been asking for emails, and I just can't answer everything in the chat and right now. So we will follow up with you on that. We're going to need help with, like, once the bill is done, maybe I'll just take us a minute to just frame like what's next for people. And then I want to let Kenya and Steffen end this, get the last word. that just from the legislator perspective, giving you, just keeping it real. Here's what's coming up. Okay, we're going into this holiday break. During this holiday break, some of us aren't really taking a full break. So we're going to be working on this bill behind the scenes. I mean, yes, we're going to take some days off. Don't worry about us. But but we are also going to be working to try to get this bill ready. And once it's in a state where it's clean and not going to scare you when you look at how messy it is. Because with the way it works is we go back and forth with the lawyers at this point. So it's until that process is done, we don't want it to be public. We will share the bill publicly. Once it's public, we need everybody out there. And some of you are legislators. Hi, thank you for coming today, my colleagues. We want you to be co-sponsors. If you're here today, I hope that's a good sign. I see some of you nodding like that you want to be part of this with us. So what we're going to need is people to reach out to your legislators and say, please sign on as a co-sponsor. We want this bill to have 60, 70 people on it. We want to show that it's serious and that there's serious interest. So there'll be a week or two in the beginning of January where we'll be collecting co-sponsors, and we want to hand this bill in by the middle of January. We want to get it in early because things take time, and during a pandemic, it's going to be harder to do anything. So our hope is to get it in January and really to push this as part of the recovery from the pandemic, that as we recover from this pandemic, and we'll be working on the messaging, so we'll help you with this, that as part of the recovery from this pandemic, we can't just go back to how things used to be. We need to look at the problems in the economy that have existed and that were enhanced by the pandemic, and we need to address those systemic issues. And that this is a solution to those systemic issues, and that will really help people. And letting Black people, letting Indigenous people, and other people of color own land in communities all over the state helps everyone. It makes every town better, So this is really, so anyway, I'm going off on a little tangent. I was trying to stick to process and I got a little excited, but I'm glad people are laughing and you can appreciate it. But just to give you that heads up, that sign up for our get on our list. In early January, we're going to be sending you some talking points and asking you to get legislators to be co-sponsors. We're going to try to hand it in by mid-January. And then once it's handed in, it will go to a committee. And then we're going to send lots of emails to that committee. And we're going to call them and we're going to say, please, please take up this bill for testimony. And then that will give us an opportunity to bring some of the BIPOC leaders you see here today and others to come in and talk to the legislature directly about this bill in hopes of passing something in the next year or two. And Mark Hughes just chimed in that this does intersect with the work of the Racial Justice Alliance, and that the Racial Justice Alliance, I'm part of the steering committee, we will be coming out soon with our own press conference in which this bill is a piece of the overall agenda that we're proposing. So I want to hand it over to Kenya and Steffen to end. I won't say anything else. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So who wants to go first? You want to do rock, paper, scissors on Zoom?
I'll just go
Kenya.
first. Oh, right. It worked. I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending this and supporting this, and the comments are really inspiring. Zamora, I just want to answer one last part of your question before I lose my opportunity. The hope for all of the committees coming out of this this document is that they will be diverse in all the ways. It won't just be like the wealthy elite people of color in Vermont. It'll be people from all over the state, all demographics, all socioeconomic ranges. And we hope that people like you asking questions like the questions you're asking will be on these committees to make sure that anti-Blackness is not a part of this, so that we can work together to make sure that everyone is actually being served. That's pretty much all I wanted to say. I just want to thank you all for coming and for listening and supporting this work. Steffen, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I guess I would add, first and foremost, I think it's kind of a funny thing, but I think Zoom press conferences are actually pretty fun. It differs to the other ones that we've been part of and that I've done in person. I would say that, I would just stop and pause as Brian did earlier and say, what a beautiful moment this is, not only for folks of color, but I think as someone said in the chat, for all of us as Americans who are descendants, and when I say Americans, I just mean the broad term, standing on this soil right now, who are part of this movement, because our ancestors could have never seen it coming, right? They could have envisioned it, but to see it in this way, I think it's wonderful that we're coming out of the gate with this. We are hoping that you support everything that we're pushing forward, and know that we're going to try our very best to really encompass everything that we have felt ancestrally, and that we envision that you have felt. I would also just like to kind of crush what I would call like white-led norms of how these things go, and express my gratitude publicly for Kenya and Brian, and to say that it is important that we know, because so few times in history is it noted that this, and Mindy and Shane, I don't want to leave them out, but I was going to say it's important that we note that this was led by Black, queer, and femme individuals, and that for so long, Black, queer, and femme individuals have been the cornerstone of these movements, but they have not actually been prioritized in these movements, and so their safety has been violated. And I want you to know that we're trying our best to keep that in mind as well, and we are happy to be moving forward. And I will not drone on, but I wanted to add that. And with that being said, I guess thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions, you know how to reach out. You know what to do. Bye, y'all. See you later.
I have to go to work. I'm like a little late, everyone.
Hey, Brian, before you jump off, I think you have the ability to save the chat. I don't have it on my end.
How do I do that? Because I was trying to figure it out.
Down by your chat box, it should say file, or you should be able to click those three dots, and it should say save chat on it.
Not.
Also, I would love to check in with everyone else. And if
It's not. I know. I'm fine with that, but I'm late for work, and people are waiting for me. So I actually really have to set a limit. So I don't know how you want it. You can keep talking on Zoom without me, but I can't figure out any other technical issues right now. Like I have to go to people. My phone is blowing up with someone. Like, why are you late? So
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you talk.
I haven't been able to save the chat, but I've taken photos of all the questions.
Thank you.
Oh, great, wonderful.
So I'll leave. You all can keep talking. I'm just gonna shut my camera and mute myself and go in the other room because I don't want to interrupt the discussion, but I'm just letting everyone know why I'm and I tried to stop the recording and it won't let me stop it either. So I don't have a good explanation.